Can you hear the voice in the background? All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Perry Clausen, Executive Director of Valley Water Collaborative, and this is our second of two community outreach meetings this week. And we're going to talk about the Modesto-Turlock Management Zone and the activities that we are involved with. So before we get started, I want to give our interpreter a chance to explain how to access the Spanish function and also to go over the Zoom etiquette for those who have questions and are going to be participating with us in this seminar. So I'll go to the next slide.
Muy buenas noches a todos, bienvenidos a la reunión. Si usted necesita acceso de interpretación en español, sí la tenemos disponible. Para seleccionar interpretación, solamente seleccione el icono que parece un mundo que pueden ver en la parte inferior de su pantalla. Después de que seleccionen interpretación, van a seleccionar el lenguaje de español. Pueden poner en silencio el audio original para que de esa manera solamente escuchen la presentación en español. Pueden hacer sus comentarios o hacer preguntas en español y nosotros estaremos aquí para asistirles y responder a cualquier pregunta. Bienvenidos a la Junta.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go to the next slide, and Lydia.
Good evening, everybody. So just a couple of things to go over here in terms of guidelines for the meeting today and function with Zoom. So it's important for us to capture in the meeting today the attendee list. So if you could look at your name and make sure that you are represented with a first and last name, that would be fantastic. If you're not shown as a first and last name, maybe you're calling in and you're shown as a phone number, if you could please rename yourself or send an email to me at the email that's shown here on the side, or put your first and last name in the chat, I can update your name on the participant list so that we capture proper attendance. All attendees in this webinar are muted. I've given the two of you opportunity to unmute yourselves during the Q&A so that we can hear any questions you may have. We will have a period for Q&A at the end of the presentation. You can ask questions a couple of different ways. You can type your questions into the Q&A using the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. You can also raise your hand and we'll call on you to ask a question. Or during the period of time when we ask, are there any questions, you can unmute yourself, introduce yourself, and ask your question then. If you're having any technical issues, please use the chat function. I will do my best to help you with any technical issues that you're having, or one of the other panelists will try to assist as well. Thank you so much.
Great, thanks, Lydia. And we'll go to the next slide and the one following. So I want to give an overview introduction of what we'll be covering today, this evening in this presentation. The next slide. I want to give you some background on Valley Water Collaborative and also the purpose of the meeting this evening. And without going into a lot of detail, it's a very complex program, the Nitrate Control Program, and the elements that are included in the nitrate management zones that we are participating in and developing plans. And also want to give you some direction on how you might be able to participate in this management zone activity, especially as we're developing the plans. And then we have some very extensive mapping that will show you the impacted areas in the Modesto and Turlock groundwater basins and where the nitrate levels appear to be the highest. And then at the end, we want to go through the drinking water solutions that are described in the early action plan that is being proposed as part of this overall preliminary management zone proposal. And then most importantly is how do you connect with the management zone? We'll give you some phone numbers, contact information, and then have a wrap up where hopefully you have some questions. And as Lydia explained, you can raise your hand or put in the chat or the Q&A section any questions during the presentation. And we'll keep an eye on that in case we need to pause to answer those questions. So the next slide explains Valley Water Collaborative. We were started late last summer as a nonprofit to help the entities who are covered by the Regional Water Quality Control Program called the Nitrate Management Plan. And these management zones are developed to address nitrate contamination in groundwater that may be used for drinking water in these basins. This organization is working with others in this area to improve this nitrate water quality, both now and in the future. And we want to work with you as we develop these plans, refine them, and roll them out to make sure that we're reaching the communities who need access to this safe drinking water. And you see the complete mission of our organization below, but it's primarily the key points are underlined, and that's implementing the programs to provide this access to safe drinking water for residents. And then as I mentioned too, enhancing the quality of groundwater over the long term. Each of us that is regulated by this program have nitrates used in our inputs, and we want to make sure that any of those excess nitrates don't make it down to the groundwater aquifers. So in the next slide is an organizational chart of Valley Water Collaborative, and our goal is, as an organization, we have an immense geographic area, and we want to make sure that whatever we do, we are able to realize economies of scale. So when we have bottled water deliveries or any of the other aspects of this program, we want to make sure that we're doing it as economically and efficiently as we can. Currently, we have the Modesto and Turlock subbasins that are involved in Valley Water. And then in the Priority 2 basin, Merced, pretty much the Merced County area, they will be joining us likely next year when they too get a notice to comply. So the board of directors is the business management part of the management zones. And then below, we are in the process of setting up basin-specific committees. And those committees' roles will be providing budgets, giving us input, the board of directors input on localized changes or improvements or anything that's involved specifically in each of the basins, and then help facilitate the local outreach as we roll out the program. And then it's pretty much open to everybody. I mean, it is open to anyone who wants to participate in these, as stakeholders in these committee, environmental justice, and any other type of community groups that feel the need to participate. They're welcome to join us. And the next slide, it shows our website that we've set up, and many of you are probably on our list already, but if not, we have a place where you can join either the stakeholder list or the community participant list for these meetings. This meeting, we send out email announcements for this meeting we're on today. We will continue to do that through the months and years as we have other community meetings or any other information that would be of interest. In particular, what last week was posted the first draft of our plan. It has both English and Spanish versions that are available for folks to proofread, provide comments on. And there's also, you'll see a little bit later, some easy commenting through a link on those pages. So the purpose of today's meeting is described in the next slide is to update you on the status of this plan development. And these management zones are a pretty complicated process, but we've gone through, and you'll see here shortly, the areas that have unsafe nitrate levels through the mapping that we've done, some of the solutions that we're putting forward to provide safe drinking water, and then the paths and avenues that you can use to comment on these draft management zone documents. And you'll hear these terms several times through the presentation: the preliminary management zone proposal and the early action plan. And previous meetings to this have been recorded, where we had more of an overview of the whole activity, similar to tonight. But you can go to our website and see the recordings of those Zoom meetings that we have put forward. Someday we'll have live meetings along with everyone else. So right now we're using the Zoom medium to put this information out. Okay, on the next slide, well, I have an introduction and transition to the Nitrate Control Program. And when I explain, why does nitrate matter? What is a management zone? What does it do? And then again, how can I participate? So what is the Nitrate Control Program? In the next slide, you can see what the management zones look like in the Modesto and Turlock Basin. These are designated as areas by the Department of Water Resources. So it's not just the city of Modesto or Turlock, it's the entire basin that you see outlined here on this map. And the goal of these management zones and the Nitrate Control Program is to ensure there's safe drinking water provided to the public. We want to reduce our nitrate impacts to water supplies, and then in the long term, restore the groundwater quality where it's reasonable, feasible, and practicable. And then, of course, as we're talking about today, we're implementing this program through the Valley Water Collaborative and to establish these management zones in these areas. There are other management zones throughout the Central Valley. None are combined, at least to my knowledge yet, in the form that we are, but there are other management zones throughout the Central Valley who have the similar requirements that we do. And if you want to get a lot more information on management zones, you can go to the website you see at the bottom of the screen, the cvsalinity.org, and the Nitrate Control Program, where there's some overview of the regulations that were developed by the Regional Water Board. So who and what, the next slide, who and what is a management zone? So it's led by the dischargers of nitrate that are in these two basins. We all, as dischargers, received a notice to comply for the Nitrate Control Program, and then a major part of that is making sure residents have safe drinking water impacted by nitrate. And then the members are described as dischargers because of the nitrate, but they include agriculture, dairies, poultry, wineries, food processors, city wastewater treatment plants, and others. Big employers in the area, maybe even some of you on the call are employed by them. And what we want to do is develop this management zone solutions working with the local individuals. So we want to make sure your concerns are covered, and whatever programs we roll out definitely have input from the local communities. Okay, so the next slide, couple of slides, I want to talk about nitrate specifically. Overriding all the water qualities, drinking water concerns in California is a policy that was adopted by the state, and it's called the Human Right to Water Policy, and it overrides all the regulations that are adopted either by regional board, state board, Department of Water Resources. And the overriding factor in this policy is that every human being has the right to safe, clean, affordable, and accessible water adequate for human consumption, cooking, and sanitary purposes. And the characteristics of nitrate are somewhat unusual in that people sometimes will go to the coast and they'll taste the water and it's a little different, or they go into a large city, go to LA, and you taste something in that water. It isn't nitrate, because nitrate is both tasteless and odorless. And another characteristic of nitrate is that you can't boil the water to get rid of it. When you have coliform or any bacteria, boiling will certainly kill those bacteria, but it doesn't work with nitrate. The health effects primarily are to the very young, 3 to 4 month old children and older citizens, and it reduces the ability for blood to absorb oxygen. So that is the health effect that nitrate has been documented to cause. And then how do you know if your water is safe? In the next slide, I'm going to talk about directly where you get water in your house, because that makes a big difference. If you're in a city or in a public water system, the water that's delivered to your home, it has to be compliant with any drinking water standards, including nitrate. And when you get your water bill every quarter, maybe once a year, you'll get a statement from the city of what is found in your water and those levels. If you haven't got that report, you can go to this website. You see the water boards, they will have those notices published. Now, if you have a private domestic well or a very small water system, maybe one well with 2 or 3 homes hooked to it, then most likely you don't have that well tested. And if you do have those wells, The only way you can know if you have safe water that's below the nitrate standard is to have that well sampled by a private laboratory. Okay, in the next slide, I'm going to talk about the management zones and how they can help and how you can get involved. So I'm going to turn it over to Richard Meyerhoff, and he's going to explain more about the management zones and the work that we've been doing.
All right, thank you, Perry. All right, so you've been hearing a lot about why management zones are being formed in the Turlock and the Modesto subbasins. And as Perry shared a moment ago, this is all associated with the Nitrate Control Program, which has various goals to be implemented over a number of years. But the most important goal, and the very first goal in that program, is to address the nitrate drinking water concerns, not just in Modesto and Turlock, but other areas in the Central Valley. So one of the key ways the management zone wants to work with you as residents in the area is to make sure that you do have safe drinking water, that it does not have unsafe levels of nitrate. If it's determined that you do, through collaboration with the Valley Water Collaborative, then alternatives will be available to you to get replacement water for your home. Over the long term, so what we're doing now is implementing short-term solutions, so we address the problem immediately. But over the long term, the intent is for the management zone to create, develop, and implement long-term permanent drinking water solutions for the area. There's many ways to be involved. One is obviously being part of meetings like this, and there have been others in the past. There'll be more, many more in the future. But there will be other ways to participate by providing direct input on the development of the management zone, as well as the implementation documents. And the best way to stay involved, and this will be mentioned again towards the end of the presentation, is to sign up with the Valley Water Collaborative at their website. So next slide. So how can you participate now? There's a reason why we're holding a public meeting at this juncture in the process, and that is that a preliminary management zone proposal has been put out for public review. This is the first key document that must be submitted by any management zone as they form. It gets submitted to the Central Valley Water Board for review. It is due to the board on March 8th. And right now we have a public draft of that document out to get input from the community regarding the information that has been developed for your area. The kinds of things that are in this proposal range from the basis for why this management zone, so some background information, characterizes the zone, tells you what the kinds of characteristics, anything from water quality to land use, that type of information. It dives into understanding what are the water quality concerns and where most likely is nitrate to be unsafe. It identifies who are the dischargers that are actually supporting and developing the management zone. And last but not least, but probably better to say most importantly, is it has the early actions in there in the proposal as to what is planned in the near future for helping residents make sure they have safe water. That plan is the second bullet on the screen there is called an early action plan. It is a component of the overall proposal. And we'll talk more about that in a few minutes regarding what is being proposed to be included in that plan. Next slide. So, as I mentioned, it's now available for public review, and it will be till February 22nd. That will be, again, a reminder of that at the end of this presentation. To access the documents, you can go to the Valley Water Collaborative's website. In the upper right corner is a menu item called Plan. Click on that and you have various options of documents that you can download to review. If you want to read the entire proposal, that is, again, the foundational document to establish the management zone. That is the first bullet on the screen, preliminary management zone proposal. If you want to simplify your review and look just at the early action plan, which, as I say, I'll describe more in a moment, but really kind of lays out what is the plan to make sure residents have safe water. There's a document specific to Modesto subbasin and a second document specific to the Turlock subbasin. Each is broken up into different parts because these things get lengthy. And so you can read just the main document, you can look at the appendices. And if you really are limited on time, we recommend anyone take a look at the executive summaries, which are provided in English and Spanish. These are about a 4-page document that gives you the highlights very quickly as to what is planned for the near future. Next slide. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Barb Dogish with Ludor Scalmanini Consulting Engineers. They have been doing an enormous amount of analysis of water quality data and talk about what areas of each of the subbasins is most likely impacted by nitrate.
Thanks, Richard. So I'm a hydrogeologist, and I've been doing a lot of the work on the water quality side of these regulatory requirements for the Nitrate Control Program in both the Modesto and Turlock management zones. So tonight I'll be talking about all of the different methods we use to start identifying areas most likely impacted by elevated nitrate levels in groundwater. So I'll talk about where high nitrate occurs within the Modesto and Turlock management zones, and then show you an interactive map feature that I made that can help you zoom into your neighborhood and see where you are within the management zone and what the estimated nitrate might be in domestic wells near you. Last, I'll discuss some statistics regarding the number of wells and the estimated population that might be affected by elevated nitrate levels. Next slide, please. So first things first, in order to determine nitrate conditions in our area, I did a massive data search. I collected all available groundwater nitrate data from all of the public sources, such as state and federal databases. This includes tapping into and querying data from sources such as GeoTracker Gamma, the Department of Water Resources, the U.S. Geological Survey, the Division of Drinking Water, State Water Board regulated facilities, Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program monitoring data, some UC Davis nitrate data, et cetera. So in addition to those publicly available data sources, we also sent a bunch of data requests for any wells with nitrate sample records from the county departments of environmental or public health, as well as local irrigation districts and water districts. So all of this nitrate sample data was compiled into a massive nitrate data set specific to the Modesto and Turlock subbasins to be used for a spatial analysis. Next slide, please. So now that we have this big data set of nitrate from all those sources and covering the entire area, both subbasins, as well as the edges of the subbasins, I needed to categorize these wells and their nitrate data into depth zones. So the Nitrate Control Program is focused on what's called the upper zone of groundwater. This is a previously defined term that was developed to indicate the portion of the groundwater system that most domestic wells are completed in. So to give you a little background, when you drill a domestic well, they typically don't drill them as far down underground as you would for, say, a larger municipal supply well or even a high capacity agricultural well. Those wells are typically drilled to deeper depths. And so nitrate levels from those wells might be very different than nitrate levels in a domestic well located in the same area. The simplified cross-section shown on the right side of this slide illustrates the various zones of the groundwater system in our area. This cross-section is kind of like if you pretended that the earth was a cake and you sliced the cake down the middle and looked at the side of the slice of the cake. So you could see the land surface on top. That's where we would be with the houses and roads and people walking around. And then right below it is what's called the vadose zone. And that's kind of the unsaturated zone right before you hit the groundwater. So, and then you see the next blue zone, which represents the upper zone. And that's kind of the upper portion of the groundwater system. And that's where most of these domestic wells are completed. You'll also notice on this cross-section, there's a significant clay unit called the Corcoran clay, which is specific to your area. And that can act as a barrier to vertical downward flow of groundwater movement. So that also can make a difference in what the nitrate quality or nitrate levels are in the upper zone versus some deeper production wells that are located below that Corcoran clay unit. So once I had all this nitrate data, I had to put the actual data into a correct depth zone. And so I did that using the well depth or the well type. So if I knew the well type, then I can make an assumption or look up well completion reports to assign it to the correct depth zone. And if I had a well depth associated with that nitrate sample, then it was much easier to do. So It was a lot of work to vet all that nitrate groundwater data so that I could get an accurate depiction of specifically upper zone nitrate. Next slide, please. So now that we know what the nitrate levels belong to, what depth zone the nitrate levels belong to, we need to sort of filter out just those wells that have nitrate data in the upper zone. So again, that upper zone represents the portion of the groundwater subsurface where most domestic wells tap into. So we also know that nitrate conditions can change over time, and we are most interested in recent conditions. So we limited the nitrate data to samples taken since the year 2010. So taking an average nitrate value for each well since 2010, we can see what the average nitrate concentrations look like in the upper zone. So the map on the right side of this slide shows all of the nitrate groundwater data that occurs in the upper zone since the year 2010. So each colored dot represents a well with a certain average nitrate concentration. So wells that have low nitrate concentrations are shown in green and yellow dots. The orange and red dots, or wells on the map, have higher average nitrate concentrations since 2010. So this map by itself is very helpful to get a sense of where high nitrate concentrations can be found in the zone that domestic wells get water from. But it also has a lot of spaces where we don't know what the nitrate concentration is. So to figure out what ambient nitrate conditions are in as much of the 2 management zones as we can, we use a tool called spatial interpolation. This is a mapping geostatistical technique that pretty much uses information about what we know to fill in the blanks in areas we don't know. Next slide, please. So using that interpolation technique and the meticulous vetting that I tried to describe about making sure that the recent nitrate data came from a well in the upper zone, we can really see a better picture of ambient nitrate conditions in the upper zone across those 2 management zones. So the colorful dots from the last slide are seen again in this slide because those were our control points. The colorful shaded areas from green to red represent different levels of recent ambient nitrate. So green to yellow indicate low nitrate levels and safe nitrate levels in drinking water. Orange areas indicate elevated nitrate conditions, but still under the safe drinking water limits, so considered safe. The red areas, however, indicate areas that have potentially impacted levels of nitrate higher than the safe drinking water limit. So in this map, green is good and red is bad. So if you look at the map, you can see pockets of high nitrate occurring throughout the central and western areas of both management zones. The blank spots that don't have a nitrate shading color are considered data gaps. These are areas where the nitrate level is unknown. Luckily for us, these are small areas found mostly in the eastern margins of both subbasins. So we had very good coverage. Next slide, please. So you may be looking at these maps and thinking to yourself, well, where do I fall, or where am I in these management zones? What are the nitrate conditions in my neighborhood? Do I even rely on a domestic well, or do I get my water from somewhere else? Well, to help you figure that out, I made an interactive map that you can access online. So the interactive map allows you to type in your address and it will zoom to your street. You'll be able to see the colorful shading that represents ambient nitrate in the upper zone since 2010 and see if the water pumped by domestic wells in your area is potentially unsafe to drink. So that would be, again, the red areas that we showed on the map. So if you would like to participate in this live demonstration, I would appreciate it if you could type your address in the chat. Please remember, however, that this mapping exercise is not a substitute for having your well tested to ensure that your water is safe to drink. It is merely a tool to help us identify areas where domestic wells might be impacted by high nitrate levels. Next slide, please. So this is just a little overview of what I'm about to demonstrate in the live demo of the interactive map. There's a place on the top of the screen where you can type your street address or town. There are plus and minus icons that you can zoom in or out. There's also a black hatched area, black diagonal lines that represent boundaries of public water systems. So if you pay a water bill to somebody, you are probably located within one of these public water system boundaries. and might not rely on your own private domestic well. So this map will help you identify that. And you can also click on the public water system layer to find out what the name of your water system is. So in this example on the slide, I clicked on that hatched area that's outlined in blue, and it is the City of Waterford public water system. So in addition, there's a legend on the left that will remind you what those nitrate levels are. And remember that red means that ambient nitrate levels are potentially unsafe to drink. So now I'm going to share my screen and give you a live demonstration. Okay, so as I mentioned before, here up on the top right is where you can type in your address. The legend is here on the left that shows you, the hatched areas are different public drinking water system boundaries. The shaded areas are different levels of nitrate, ambient nitrate since 2010, again, specific to that upper zone where domestic wells are completed. You can zoom in by clicking on the plus sign, zoom out, just kind of like Google Earth if you're familiar with that. So let's type in an address, shall we? Let's see. So here's an address in Modesto that we can look at. Okay, so this particular address is located very close to a public water system. Okay, it's also located in a red area. So let's see what public water system. So it's right outside the city of Modesto. And there's also the McHenry Golf Center. So it's very close to two different public water systems. So it's possible that this property here, this address, gets their water from a public water system, but we would have to be sure. So if this particular location relies on domestic water, it is falling within the red area, which indicates that the upper zone might have unsafe levels of nitrate, and we would recommend that you have your well tested. Let's try another address. Okay, so here's another address. Looks like it's outside Modesto, and it's in an area, also a red area, but look at how variable it is. There's some green and yellow and orange and red as well in the area. So this is one of the kind of interesting things about nitrate, is that it can be very different across a small area just based on land use and other hydrogeologic factors. So again, this property, you would probably, if you are relying on a domestic well, which it looks like they're outside of any other public water system, which again are those black hatched areas, we would recommend that that well get tested. So just to give you a sense of the scale of these management zones, it's not just the city of Modesto, and it's not just the city of Turlock. These management zones stretched out for the entire subbasin, groundwater subbasin, which is bounded usually by rivers, and on the east by the foothills of the Sierra Nevada mountains. So it's quite a large area. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Thank you for participating in that demo. And we'll go back to the slideshow. So besides being a useful tool that can empower you and educate you about what the conditions are in the areas that you care about, this map can also be used to estimate the number of domestic wells and the population of people that might live in areas impacted by high nitrate. So the map on the right should look familiar by now, only this one shows not just the colorful shading of ambient nitrate, but it also is showing domestic well locations. So these are the black dots on the map. And in this exercise, the domestic wells are only plotted outside of known public water systems that provide drinking water and are regulated to comply with safe drinking water standards, as Perry was describing earlier. The table on the bottom shows that there are over 350 domestic wells located outside of public water systems that potentially have an estimated nitrate level above the safe drinking water standard of 10 milligrams per liter as nitrogen in the Modesto subbasin and about 1,700 in Turlock. So this means that there are potentially over 2,000 homes that rely on water that might be unsafe to drink. To further discover how many people might be affected, we can use 2010 census block mapping data. So this is a GIS layer from the Census Bureau, the federal government, that is provided to the public. And we can use that GIS layer, the map layer, to estimate the population of people living in those red areas on the map. So the table shows you that in the Modesto Management Zone, there are over 4,500 people estimated to live outside of known public water system boundaries and in the red areas where groundwater may be impacted by nitrate, and over 37,400 living in the Turlock Management Zone. So this makes a total of almost 42,000 people in the management zone that may be affected by nitrate above the safe drinking water standard. So now that we're armed with all of this information about where the nitrate problems are focused and the potential scale of the issue, we need to find some solutions. So I'll let Richard talk about what those solutions might look like. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Barb. So as we talked about already, one of the key deliverables to the establishment of the management zone is the development of an early action plan. Next slide, please. And that document itself provides what are considered the interim or the short-term drinking water solutions that are proposed for each of the management zones. There's a proposal for Modesto and a proposal for Turlock. And the intent of the early action plan is to work with the community to decide what's best for those specific areas. We've been having a number of meetings. We've been having discussions. We have developed a proposal at this point. It's draft and it's available for review, but the discussion will continue so that these plans can be fully adaptive to the needs of the community. So what I'm going to do in the next few slides is describe the general program that is being proposed for each of the management zones, and then recognize that you'll have opportunities to continue to provide input as we go down the road. Next slide. All right, so again, what is the early action plan? It's focused on the nitrate concerns, all that work that Barb just summarized in describing what the water quality concerns are in each of the management zones, and our current state of knowledge is with regards to likely areas that have unsafe levels of nitrate. The early action plan is targeted towards those areas, though it does apply to the entire management zone. And you've seen this graphic several times now. It is to keep indicating that when we talk about unsafe, we're talking about nitrate results in a water test from your well that shows that the nitrate concentrations are above 10 milligrams per liter as nitrogen. If it's below that, it's still considered safe to drink. Obviously, as you get closer to that red zone, there might be additional concerns, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Next slide. So the early action plan is all about working with you to provide interim replacement water. And if you read the plan, you'll find that for those residents that are found to be impacted, will be two immediate options available to you to obtain safe drinking water, and a third option that may still be developed. So the two that will be available immediately are household specific. They are intended to work directly with the resident in their home. One is home bottled water delivery, and the second is install a point of use treatment system in your home. For point of use, that requires someone to come in and modify plumbing to install a very small treatment device under a sink where you're most likely to use that faucet to obtain your drinking water or water for cooking. So a typical location for installation in a home would be under a kitchen sink. There are many different types of devices. There are many different factors that go in as to what's appropriate and how those are installed. But those will all be considered as part of the process of determining whether one should be installed in your home. But it would be one of the options available to residents. So both home bottled water and point of use are to work directly with homeowners in their residences. But there may be many people who, even if they understand that their well is has high nitrate and there's a concern, may not want either of those services. And so the discussion is going to go on through 2021 to work with the community to find out how much interest there is in installing local water fill stations. These are established at strategic locations. They are connected to a public water supply with a trusted source of clean water, and any resident can drive up to them and with their bottles and fill them up at no cost at any time. Next slide. So how can you receive bottled water or point of use? And first of all, very important to understand is that if these services are offered to your home, they are offered at no cost to the resident. The management zone will be paying not just the cost of the service or the installation of a point of use system, they will also pay for the ongoing maintenance and monitoring that may be required to be sure the system is operating as it's intended to. So when a resident coordinates with the management zone or contacts them and asks to have these services provided, the management zone will work with them to verify 3 basic criteria as shown here. So you should be able to answer yes to these 3 questions. First, is your home located in the Modesto or Turlock management zone? We are focused on those 2 specific areas. Are you willing to sign an agreement with the management zone's service provider? The management zone, to implement these programs, will be working with vendors that, as their business, provide these kinds of services. They are the ones that will come to your home to either bring you bottled water or to install and maintain a point of use system. And they often have their own agreements for them to provide those services directly to your home. So you must be willing to meet their terms and conditions. Last, and probably the most important, is your well actually unsafe? Does it have high nitrate levels that exceed 10 milligrams per liter? If you can answer yes to all those, then the management zone will work with you very quickly to establish one of these services. Next slide. What if you don't know what the nitrate level is? And a lot of people don't know. There are some who may have had their well tested and they may have recent results that they can share with the management zone. If that's the case, then that information can be provided and can be used to provide services to the home. But in most cases, most homeowners or landowners or renters will not know what the quality of water is coming from their well. And so the management zone will send out a representative to the home, again, at no cost to the resident, to have that well tested for nitrate. The results will be shared, not just with the resident, if he's a renter, but also with the homeowner or the landlord, if there's someone else who actually owns the property and has a tenant living in that property. But that information will be provided so that those who are in the home know what the nitrate levels are. If they exceed the 10 milligrams per liter, the safe level, then it's considered unsafe, and then the management zone will begin to work as quickly as possible to connect you with either bottled water or a point of use system provider. Or again, as I said, if the resident is not interested in either of those services, they just wanted to know whether or not the well was safe, but then want to obtain water from an alternative source. As I mentioned, there may be fill stations available, and if that's the case, they're welcome to use those as well. If the nitrate levels are high, we consider high greater than 8 milligrams per liter, so it's still safe to drink, but it's getting closer to that unsafe level, then the program will include an opportunity to have your well sampled again on an annual basis, just to verify that the water quality is not changing from where you're getting your water. Groundwater tends to not change too quickly in terms of its concentration, so annual is probably frequent enough, but that frequency can be looked at if it's necessary in a local situation. Anything below 8 currently is considered low to moderate in terms of nitrate levels, and we plan at this point through the plan to not offer additional testing for nitrate under the early action plan. That one test will be sufficient to evaluate whether you need an alternative source of water. As you may be aware, there are other contaminants, sometimes in groundwater. The nitrate program or the management zone effort is focused on nitrate and not on these other contaminants, but the Valley Water Collaborative will be working with other organizations and other entities that are implementing programs to look at other types of contaminants that might be in groundwater. And with those opportunities are available, they will be offered again to the resident at no cost to have their well sampled. Next slide. Okay, I've mentioned water fill stations a couple of times. Just want to reiterate that point is that right now the plan calls for continued evaluation with the community. As I indicated, they're a trusted source because they are connected to a compliant public water system. So the water that's piped into that dispenser of water is already been tested and known to be safe for nitrate. There may be a need for these facilities to capture the general community, and they become available anytime, 24/7. You can bring as many bottles as you want. You can come as frequently as you want, and water can be filled in those bottles at no cost to you. But as indicated, we'll be working with the community to determine not just the need for, but how many and the potential locations for those fill stations. And most likely, if they are implemented, that we would focus, of course, on the most likely impacted areas, and those are the red areas that Barbara's already talked about. Next slide. So how can you connect with the management zone? We're talking about a program here that will be available. It becomes available by May 7th of this year, so just a short couple months down the road. That's when the early action plan will begin implementation. You can connect with the management zone in a number of ways. This kind of meeting is one way. There will be many more of these community-wide outreach meetings. As noted earlier, we'd love to have them in person and plan to do so down the road. But for now, as long as we're restricted, we'll continue this platform for sharing information. But we're also going to conduct some targeted outreach. We will be seeking to send a direct mail outreach material to each of the residents that we believe are most likely to be impacted. Those are the red areas again. And we'll be developing a mailing list to try and connect with them directly to let them know what their options are, the program is active, and how they can connect with the Valley Water Collaborative to get their well tested. Those are our ways to reach out to you, but at the same time, any resident at any time in either management zone can contact the Valley Water Collaborative and ask for more information. And if they want their well tested, they may request that at any time. Next slide. So with that, in a nutshell, is the content of the early action plans. They are key documents for the management zone proposal and are intended to be implemented fairly soon. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Perry to wrap it up.
All right, thank you, Richard. And on the next slide, I'll show you some email addresses here. The EAP comments at valleywaterc.org is where you can send comments, ask questions about the program. My phone number is listed there if you want to give me a call and talk further about what we've discussed this evening. You're welcome to do so. And then in our on our website, we have a form, a questionnaire that you're able to fill out in an anonymous fashion to comment on the early action plan. So you see the address listed here, and it's also on our website. And our comment deadline for this pre-submittal to the regional board is February 22nd. Now, after we submit this plan to the regional water board, it will be then available again for a 30-day comment period. So this is a preliminary before we send it in. So we're taking comments and we'll make adjustments at this time. And then, of course, after it goes out for a second public comment period. Again, the next slide, some of the upcoming dates. We didn't update that today, so we have this meeting this evening. We have our March 8th deadline that we're all working to get this plan in on time. And then we have this comment period, as I mentioned, an extra 30 days. And then implementation of the activities begin in early May. We put May 7th, but it may be earlier, maybe a little later, but right on early May, we'll begin implementing this early action plan. The only thing that might hold it up, I'm pretty optimistic that won't happen, is if the regional board has some pretty significant changes to the plan or says it's incomplete. That may stall these activities, but regional water board has been in these meetings and we've been talking to them very frequently about what's included in these plans. So we're pretty confident we're in good shape with what we've developed. And then one final slide is some more email addresses, and you can get some more information on the Nitrate Control Program on this website. Valley Water C is our regular website. My email address again is here. And you can sign up, as I showed you earlier, to get updates and more information as the plan is developed and then as we roll out the program. And then we'll have this presentation, both the Zoom recording and also the PowerPoint slides available for downloading and your access. So that about wraps up our presentation for this evening. If anyone has any questions, they can either raise their hand or actually we've got a small group. We can unmute participants and go ahead and ask any questions if you have any. Well, hearing none, I guess I'll say good evening, everybody. Thank you, Richard and Barbara, for the presentation, and we'll hope to hear from you all sometime in the future. Oh, here we want to say thanks. Okay. And you're welcome. Appreciate you guys logging in tonight. Have a good evening, everybody.